welcome to the Art to Art podcast. We're a podcast produced by the students at Dundee University in relation with the Cooper Gallery. This podcast is basically all about hosting discussions featuring current topics, guest artists, and events to look out for. Art to Art brings you a collaborative voice, sharing ideas and interests from the student body and the local art scene. And today's episode is basically just an introduction to the team.
Art to Art.
My name's Kate, and I'm a fourth year art and philosophy student at DJ CAD. My work is mostly about storytelling. I like to represent the voice of the individual in relation to often a group or a community. Because I do philosophy, I'm often inspired by the writings of Donna Haraway and especially Ursula Le Guin. She's got a great quote that says, "People have been telling the life stories for years in all sorts of different words and ways." And I really believe in this. I believe in this kind of idea of sharing the everyday life story. I think that's really important. I draw inspiration basically from my hometown of Aberdeenshire and my home area of Aberdeenshire and the Doric dialect that's spoken there. I've really been interested recently in drawing parallels between kind of cottage crafts such as knitting and weaving and the sort of stories that are shared by the people of certain areas. I try and really get involved with the dialect of where I'm from, but it's not something that I'd naturally speak. I guess the younger generation, it's not something that we would chat to each other in, it's something that I guess some people would worry has died out. So I try and I interact with it. I've been in a few Doric plays. For the crafting side of things, my granny tried to teach me how to knit, but it never really, I never really got into it as a kid. But now I'm finding myself doing it more. And I think that they're really connected. Their pedagogical means are similar and everything. So in my practice, I've kind of started using it a lot more in the past year. I did a semester where I studied in Canada. And when I was there, I became really aware that I was this young female Scottish artist that I'd now been taken out of kind of my home place. And I found that really interesting. And while I was there, I sort of developed this practice of making these sort of whispering kind of crafts. I'd used audio in my work a lot before, but it was only really when I was away that I started to kind of connect the two. So I've made this kind of whispering blanket, and it was a piece called Mother Tongue. And I recorded a lot of different other international students speaking about their mothers in their mother tongues. And I made it into this audio piece, and I got some songs of my mother singing, and I wove it through this craft. So when you went close to it, it whispered. And when I came back home, I really liked this idea. I liked about how it interacted with the viewer and how it kind of represented this idea of a community, even though people were from different places. So to kind of bring that back to what my current interest is in this kind of dialect and my personal heritage, the degree show piece that I'm making at the moment, I've been collecting crafting pieces from crafters up from the northeast, and I've been recording people speaking the Doric dialect. So Arthur Watson, one of the tutors at Duncan of Jordanstone, I've recorded him singing a ballad. Sheena Blackhall, who's a famous Aberdeenshire poet, I've got a recording from her. And then just everyday people I've grown up around, I've been recording them speaking. And I'm eventually creating this big sort of whispering piece that will bring together the crafts of the area and the dialect of the area. So everything that I'm kind of interested in. So it should be a really quite nice evocative piece. But yeah, as a student as well, I get involved as an ambassador and yeah, student curatorial team. Things like this podcast, which we're now bringing to you. So that's enough about me. I'm going to pass on to Amy, who's going to introduce herself next. Off you go.
Okay. I don't think I've actually ever heard you talk about your work.
Oh,
I didn't actually know that that's what you did.
I know, quite a few people have bumped into me recently and gone, did you post this on Instagram? And I go, yeah, that's what I do. But yeah.
Right, well, I'll say a little bit about myself as well then. So I am Amy, as Kate mentioned. I'm also a fourth year, but on the fine art course. I am from Edinburgh, unlike Kate, who is Aberdeenshire, but has been in Dundee for the past 3 years. So yeah, I'm just going to tell you a bit more about my current practice, which I like to say kind of maps physical, virtual and theoretical space. So I'm going to kind of talk you through in sort of the elements that kind of really resonate in my work. And kind of the first and most common is kind of space. So by combining architecture, sculpture, kind of painting and lighting, I kind of hope for my viewer to kind of be enveloped into a kind of experiential and multi-dimensional space. So I often utilise kind of undefined in-between spaces, which I guess at their kind of simplest form could be corridors, elevators, kind of so on, like kind of literal spaces in between kind of one and another, just kind of places of transition. So the work that I kind of create is in response and kind of represent these spaces, often as line drawings or paintings, and act as temporal and ephemeral spaces, which the viewer can question the construction of space, both physically and theoretically. So the other kind of element that I really like to focus on is that of the viewer or the audience. So the audience is kind of encouraged to physically move around my sculptural and kind of spatial interventions, and often this physical movement enables the depiction or the understanding of the kind of paintings or drawings. This physical movement within the space also allows the work to kind of act as an interchangeable process and provide endless possibilities of both image and composition. And I've just realised how much I've said kind of. I'm going to try and not say kind of, because that seems to be my word to go for. Anyway, so I try to use a balance of recognition and ambiguity. The observer perceives the painted world as part of the space kind of which they stand in. So the viewer is at the same time an observer on the outside and within the piece, whilst imagining the kind of invisible and alternative spaces that surround them. So I'm really kind of interested in creating a new means for the viewer to interact and navigate their surroundings. So the practice that I'm doing right now uses controlled lighting, which is enabled through the use of sensors and reveals and conceals details of the composition, which kind of enable the viewer's perception of depth. And it is this kind of perception and perspective, which is another big element in my work, which as perspective both informs and confuses the notion of the real. There's a sort of questioning of the real space and the virtual space, and our perceptions are kind of always in a constant state of flux, so they're never constantly stable. So this is another material that I've just, not material, but sort of element that I like to pick upon. So yeah, that's just a little bit about my practice. I know I said kind of like 20 times, but yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, hello. My name is Lewis. I am a first year. I'm on the general foundation course at DG CAD. I'm originally from like just outside Glasgow, but obviously moved up to Dundee, and I'll be here for the next 3 years. So yeah, basically with the foundation course, it's very much you come in straight from school. There's lots of people that come straight from school or college. They come in with maybe a restricted mindset, and something that I personally have really enjoyed during this course is breaking that away completely. There's no limits to what you can do within this course. Obviously, there's been limitations this year with the situation with COVID, but in all of the projects that I've done, there's always been a sense of me pushing myself to do something different each and every time, which I've really, really enjoyed. Some things that I've done during this are like some sculptural works that I never thought I would do, and through that managed to find a designer that I really like called David Mack. He's a really good sculptor, and he is actually a graduate from DG CAD, so that tells you a lot about the good people that come out of DG CAD. currently, at the stage that I'm at now, I'm doing a graphic design project as my final project, sort of, with hopes of going on to graphic design for the next 3 years. But I have hit a wall where I am completely questioning myself whether I want to do graphic design or I want to do contemporary art practice. And I think everyone else here will vouch for contemporary art practice, but I'm at two sides right now. So I'm one click away from sending an email to my advisor being like, okay, I want to switch to CAP, or I'll go on with graphics. So I need to figure that out. But all in all, this course has been so great. I'm really excited to be specialising and staying within DGCAD, and obviously getting involved in something like this, the student curatorial team, from such an early point is hopefully going to be so beneficial in terms of opening my mind to what is actually possible to do within art school and beyond. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do. I think next I'm going to pick and choose somebody to move on to. I'm going to pick Rachel to move on to.
Hello, definitely choose contemporary art practice. It's the one.
Dark side, Lewis. Join the dark side.
Lewis, you can do graphic design and contemporary art practice as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You don't have to just do painting.
I'll get started. So I'm a fourth year fine art student, originally from Aberdeen, and my work at the moment is mostly kind of bronze cast pieces using new media technologies such as photogrammetry and 3D printing to assist with traditional foundry casting. So ideas of time and duration are kind of central to my practice, and it mostly revolves around like an interest in how varying modes of time interact with each other, whether that be technological, geological, or human. So the work I'm currently doing is a large-scale kind of bronze rock built up onto legs called standing stone or soothsayer. So it began with a kind of coin-sized piece of chalcedony, which is a form of agate, which I found on the beach, which I scaled up using a photogrammetry software. So photogrammetry is like used quite a lot in archaeology nowadays, where ancient artifacts are kind of occupying this like digital and immaterial kind of space. So like the notion of sight's removed when these artifacts are moved into that space, and they kind of become locationless and timeless. So I guess my interest lies in the way that like this process alters our perception of time and space, and the way it kind of creates hybridized versions of the landscape. So Standing Stone's intended to invoke kind of links of the mysterious phenomena of monolithic standing stones, and it was kind of a found object that's been transformed through a process of digitization. So I reference kind of prop design and motifs from science fiction. Kind of notably this semester's been Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. And I look to contrast the futurist aesthetic of sci-fi with like the symbolism of ancient artifacts. This year and last year actually, I've been looking at Mayan obsidian mirrors. So there are these kind of black obsidian mirrors which are gazed into by priests to try and tell the future. Yeah, it's kind of a method of divination. So my current work's kind of questioning the tradition of divination in relation to the Anthropocene, which is our current like unofficial unit of geologic time, where human activities, the kind of most significant impacts are on the climate and the environment. I'm kind of in my work proposing that like science's projection of the Anthropocene is like little more than a modern day version of divination, where like peering into uncertain data is replaced an occult gaze into an obsidian. Yeah, and then in terms of artists, Ty Shani, Anne Graff, Robert Smithson, and Paca Hardware, my favourites. So yeah, I think that's me. I'll pass on to Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm Iranian from Iran. Born there, raised in Glasgow, studied in Dundee. My work completely evolves around Persian women, Persian heritage, Persian history. While I was born in Iran but raised in Glasgow, my upbringing was very particular, restricted. My mother always tried to discipline me in a certain way about being modest and ladylike, and I just wanted to be childish and a young girl. I couldn't understand why I couldn't do certain things when everybody else around me could. Then after visits to my homeland, I seen like why you can't be a girl in certain ways, and but I disagreed with it even from a young child. I just seen the way like the girls in the family were and the acting and what was restricted and what wasn't, and the way like some comments were made from the grown-ups, whether they were females or males. I just disagreed from it from the get-go. I just knew something wasn't right. It just didn't make sense. And I always just tried to like fight it in a way, but I also didn't care too much because I lived over here, but until I became a teenager, and I ended up having this double life of me doing what I want to do, but then being the person they want me to be, so I don't ruin my family's reputation. I'm still a good virgin girl saving herself for a man. Yeah, the hope's supposed to like grow up and get a degree and then get married and move out. Yeah, that's just not what's happening. I didn't even go straight to uni from high school. I broke traditions even there. So the older I got and the more I went back home, it just didn't sit well with me. And the more, like I say, growing as a person and my art practice, I just started just focusing on this and realised that the women in Iran don't fight back. They don't stand up for themselves. And I've seen generations be born into my family who just accept this life. So I make art trying to raise awareness about Persian history to begin with, because Persia was so ahead of its time when it came to feminism and women's rights. Everything was beautiful at that time and everything was great. Somehow along the way, things started to change and women started to get stripped by their rights generation by generation. And the Islamic Revolution completely took all power from women to just consolidate their position in the government. So I make art about how everything changed after the Islamic Revolution to educate my Western audience about that, while I make art also in defense of the Persian woman and try to be a voice for them, because they're too scared to stand up and they don't, because the consequences are almost fatal. I do take inspiration from Shirin Ashad's work. Even when I don't try to, it just comes out. It's another artist I'm really inspired by. Her name's Manal Aldouani, something like that. I don't know how to pronounce her surname. She's Arabic. I've seen her work in Madrid, and it really connected with her work. She's a mature artist where she makes work about Saudi Arabian women having all the restrictions, and I learned how much worse they have it. They're an emotional change a little bit, and she made work about she's been raised in such a restricted world for like 42 years, and now she's like allowed to not wear a hijab, and she doesn't know if she wants to not wear it because she doesn't know a world out of that. I'm now gonna pass it on to Crispin.
At the moment, I'm outside the back of the Crawford building working on a sculpture. So I'm podcasting and making art at the same time. So I've had quite like a strange journey through DJ CAD. I came in first year doing foundation because, well, I chose Dundee in the first place because I was really into like cartoons and sort of that side of the art, like the very comic booky and animated style that Dundee was kind of famous for. But while I was doing foundation, I gradually sort of fell out of love with that and more in love with the graphic designy and the contemporary art practice side of things, a wee bit like Lewis. And I started in first year doing graphic design, but after a while I was encouraged just to sort of branch out. But because I had a very narrow view of what sort of studying art at university was going to be like. And I think the more that I learned was on offer and like what you could do at art school, the more I kind of drifted away from that sort of graphic designy, very prescribed curriculum that they do in some parts of the university, and more towards the sort of you set your own brief side of things that was kind of on offer in fine art. The one thing that I did get from graphic design though was learning how to use a computer, which is something that Dundee's they're really famous for their computer arts sector. And the university here is really good. Like they have a really good sort of VFX department. And that was the stuff I really gravitated towards. And I got really into sort of using the computer as a tool for creating art and mixing sort of computer materials with IRL materials and like the stuff that happens when the two worlds sort of clash. My dissertation this year is about the uncanny valley, which is an effect that you get when you sort of you mix the familiar with the unfamiliar. You see it like a lot of the time in very realistic robots. You know, they look almost familiar but not quite, and that kind of has the uncanny valley response. And that's sort of the way I feel about like life at the moment, in living both as a digital human being and as a normal human being. It feels very familiar and like very sort of unfamiliar and strange at the same time. So I'm going down that route of sort of figuring out what my life is in this new sort of digital landscape. And the thing I'm producing at the moment for my degree show is like a VR version of this meadow that's near my house. I'm filling it with sculptures of things that I find around myself, like things that I live around, bits of scrap that I've found around the art school. Just mixing things from my real life in with this computerized version of my like a digital environment that represents my digital life. And hopefully at some point people are going to be able to put on a VR headset and walk through my digital world. At the moment, it's not looking likely because, well, had there been a degree show, it would be a big setup with sort of the headset and like obstacles that you could maneuver and it'd be very sort of multimedia. But at the moment, since it's just one examiner, it's sort of taking the place of like a web application that you can download on your phone and explore the artwork that way. So yeah, I just like to sort of emphasize that the departments do kind of overlap a lot. And doing contemporary art practice doesn't mean that you can't do things that you might not associate with contemporary art practice, like graphic design or like sound. My friend Callum over here, who's helping me build these objects, he's a sound creator. And also computers. If computers are your thing, then you know that there are people here to help out with that, and it's a really good place to be if you're interested in computer arts.
I was just going to say, what do you think about a virtual reality exhibition for degree show in which like it's you walk through the gallery space and then you get to your thing and then you go through a different virtual reality installation in that would be pretty sick.
That would be really sick. I think that's like the future, isn't it? Like we want to simulate the real space as close as we possibly can. Like you can get pretty close with these like super expensive VR headsets. It can like feel like you're there and you get kind of something close to that experience of actually being in an art gallery and being able to see an object from different angles. I think especially for sculpture, like looking at sculpture, you don't really get the full effect when you're just looking at it on a flat screen. But if there's a way for you to position yourself so you can see all around it.
That's what I was trying to think about for my work, is because it's very much installation based. I was like, maybe I could just use my discretionary funding for like a 360-degree camera and build it of DJ CAD and have people just walk through it. It'd be pretty sick, but yeah.
Yeah, it's an option. I think they might actually have one of those in the AV workshop here has stuff like that. Maybe not like as fancy as you could source yourself, but something that could get something pretty close. So ask them about that. They might have something cool like that.
Go on then, Emma.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Emma. I'm from Fife. So I know that sounds a bit ridiculous.
Oh no.
I'm from across the water. So you can see the village that I come from Dundee, essentially. But my work is not about being from Fife. It's mostly about language. And I see language as an inherent link to both like the environment and the past. And I'm interested in the fact that the language that's spoken in a place really like heavily dictates its cultural context. So alongside that, I kind of work with the concepts of bilingualism, ancestry, and place heritage, which has been a lot of fun. And these are things that I've found have been cropping up in my work for the past 3.5 years. So it's quite nice to be able to look back and go, that's what I look at. So yeah, at the minute I'm working towards an installation piece which I'm calling Penarbet, which is the Breton word for kind of like the end of the earth, which is also happens to be the department in France where my grandfather is from. And I'm looking at how the government suppression of an insular Celtic language, much like Gaelic or Welsh, makes a whole culture disappear in a way, particularly if it is orally based and has no written artifacts because of the nature of the language. So it's been really interesting. I've been having lots of conversations with old French people, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and it's kind of pushed my work into using materials that I've never thought about using, such as 8mm analog film, which was heavily influenced by Luke Fowler, who also happens to be DJ CAD alumni, actually, and the way he captures light and the likeness of people, and he essentially creates these sort of portraits of a place or a person through spoken, like, I guess it's not really poetry, but it's like a nice conversation and a really beautifully filmed film or moving image piece. I really like that, as well as print, and I've been developing prints, and I'm also, like Rachel, I'm interested in stones, but more for the fact that they are physical markers in a landscape rather than a geological, like, time map of the planet. So yeah, in addition to that, I'm also really inspired by Anna Mendieta and Giovanni Ozzola, who both look into their own heritage and how that, and other people's heritage in different ways, and particularly place heritage and language for the two of them as well. So it's been really enjoyable this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing how everyone's work like progresses and develops. Yeah, I think that's me. I think there's Shanoa as well that's to go next. So if Shanoa's ready, I'm going to pass the mic on.
We have quite a few connections between our work, heritage and language. I'm not very good at talking about my work, so I'll probably ramble a little. But I'm a fourth year CAP student as well, like many here. I think my practice has changed quite a lot since I've been at DJ CAD. I kind of started in second year not knowing what to do after all of the 2-week projects in first year that were giving briefs. And I started looking at identity and belonging and kind of myself, I guess, and kind of exploring what I wanted to know within me in art. I guess a little bit of background is I'm Glasgow based, but my dad is a Highlander and is a Gaelic speaker, and my mum is Navajo Native American and a Navajo speaker. So I was raised with multiple languages. I only speak English, but I had that around me, and my name is Shanoa Kiaolin BD White Rock. So they've given me 2 Navajo names and 2 Scottish Gaelic names. So yeah, I started looking at that and kind of what it meant. And I got a lot of barriers from the lecturers. I'm not going to name any names at DJ CAD, but a lot of people told me to like stop focusing on, different cultures that aren't British and to look at people that are UK based. I even got told to do work just on Dundee. And that kind of ruffled me a bit. So I decided to pursue it even more. And I was introduced into third year, kind of looking more at mixed race identity, specifically in the UK and in Scotland. Because I think being mixed race, there's a very big question about like, where do you belong? Or mixed culture, mixed heritage, because you're kind of in between. So I started looking at my experiences in Scotland and our education systems and what they teach you about our histories and our heritage and what it means to be Scottish, but also what it means to be a foreigner. And this kind of introduced me to a lot of theorists such as like Webb Du Bois and his concept of double consciousness, and the concept of the other and self, and obviously Alberto Whittle is a great artist who was a guest speaker here at DJ CAD. And yeah, I really just started kind of looking into the critique, I guess, of the national type of the UK and what like heritage and culture and language plays a role in that. So I started trying to learn my parents' languages to see if that kind of made me look at things differently. I came into fourth year and was offered the role of equality and diversity a director, which, if I was to say to anyone, I'd highly recommend you do this kind of thing in third year, because my fourth year has been chaotic with a lot going on, a lot on my plate. But it's been really eye-opening and great to experience. I'd say it's heavily influenced my practice. I'm looking a lot at general diversity within institutions and what we can do to be better. My dissertation was on the colonial gaze, and that plays a large role in my practice. I've got a few exhibitions on right now and speakers events. And yeah, I guess for my degree show, I'm just working towards, I'm really research led. So I just gather information and read it and enjoy it and distribute it, because I think a large part of my issue growing up was a lack of education and information and ignorance, facing a lot of ignorance. So I guess I just try and gather information from articles, theorists, artists, and distribute it in any way I can. So whether that's through film and photography of my parallels in my families on the reservation and in the Highlands and the Hebrides, because there's a lot more similarities there than you'd actually expect. So whether it's playing with personal experiences or just distributing information for, I guess, easy access, I think there's a laziness to life where if it doesn't affect you, you don't bother looking into it. So yeah, I'm writing indexes. I like to call them indexes, but yeah, just books on thoughts to do with our education system and how we should progress.
My name is Daira Runzoni. I'm a second year art student doing fine art. I'm originally from Argentina, but my family are very mixed, and I've been brought up in multiple areas that are a big influence in my art practice. And I think my art practice is also a discovery of who I am and I guess who I want to be. I've lived in England and back to Argentina, Glasgow, now I'm in Dundee. And every year I discover, I guess, a part of where I'm from, a country, a culture. And I use research to find out more things about my DNA and everything. And I find in my Indigenous and Native culture. And a lot of my work is about discovering that and bringing that and showing people another culture. My work is usually sculptural or made from found materials. It can start from a painting, but I'm never just satisfied with something 2D. I need it to go onto a piece of wood or something suspended or even just thrown in the air. It just can't sit still, because I like to tell a story, to get someone to think about what the art means without giving too much away, but also not making it too difficult. One of my favorite artists, called Margaret Kilgallen, who's from Mexico, she does a lot of figurative work and on wood. Her art is about using calligraphy that's now outdated and vintage. Everywhere in Mexico, everything's done by hand. And in here, I think it's a lot of mass production. And I really like how she uses that in her work. And she also uses about being a woman in the art world. And I just am inspired a lot by that, being a woman in the art world and also being brown as well. It's a rare thing to also find other artists like me. So I feel like a lot of my art, I just want to tell a story or tell someone about me or who I am. and discover different forms of art that predominantly come from South America. And in South America, there's not many artists, and I'd like to show art from there and show from the indigenous and the Native Americans who were, and also the cowboys that roam around there, because there's quite a lot. My current work in second year is mainly about an art form called fileteado, which you can find in the capital in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And it's just a calligraphy that used to be everywhere and still is there, but it's kind of dying out due to advertisement, mass production, the media, and not many people know a lot about it. And I grabbed loads of found materials, wood, and I've drawn it on. And I'm also bringing many other different things from my culture: food, drink, everything. And due to COVID, I couldn't use the studio, so I've been rebuilding my garden in uni to then put that all there, bring people in, and let them discover the art for themselves and the culture. One of the artists that inspired this idea of transforming my garden into an exhibition is an artist called Rirkrit Tiranincha, who is from Thailand. He converted museums and galleries into kitchens and even full cell-functioning replicas of his own apartment, and he would keep it 24 hours each day, allowing people to cook, host parties, and I believe people even got married in there. And his work just encourages us to reconsider our daily lives and rituals to be of greater value and to be considered as art. And I was inspired from that to just show people a culture, even a room, or even a garden can be transformed into a different place. Okay, so that's me.
I think it's really interesting to see how, even though, most of us are contemporary art practice, hopefully all of us are contemporary art. I think it's really interesting to see how even in one kind of, course, there can be so much diversity, covered and different areas explored. So I think this has been really great to kind of meet all of us, hear what we're all about. Hopefully in the podcasts to come, we will be speaking with more students, getting more different kind of types of work, both within DJ CAD and, visiting artists and whoever we can approach. So it should be really interesting.
Yeah, and just to say that we kind of just did this introductory to kind of let you know who we are and our voices, and just kind of, because we're all going to kind of just decide whoever wants when to host a podcast or an episode or whatever they're most interested in, and we don't have one sole host, if that makes sense. So yeah, just to get to know all of us and hear us.
Exactly. And all of our really interesting practices. So yes, stay tuned. Keep an eye out for what's to come. Go follow our Instagram page if you don't already. And get involved. And thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it, and you'll definitely be hearing from us soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey.
Art to art.